And let me paste this link in if you don't have it. This is the notes page. I accidentally, in some of those things I said that yesterday morning, I might have confused the charter and the notes doc, so apologies. But here's the notes. I went through, so I tell you what, I'm gonna kind of tell you what I'm kind of thinking we can do here today, and then we'll go through and everyone can introduce themselves and we could talk about this. So we've been having asynchronous conversations, I guess, for the past month, 6 weeks about this topic, about how to work together to improve schemas and searchability for artifacts. And so we're gathering here we think that a good way to do that is going to be to create a group within Tag App Delivery that will be devoted to working on this topic and building prototypes for this topic. So we've been talking kind of asynchronously in this group. This meeting now is to go through what we've said so far, try to reach consensus on a couple of the open items, and get to the point where we can hopefully submit a PR. Maybe today we start talking about some activities if you all are up for it. So I'm kind of thinking, if you don't mind, like we go around the room and kind of just introduce ourselves, like who you are, I guess your main area of work, you could say your company if you want, and what you hope to get from this artifact work or what you want to contribute. And if there's anything else we should put in this meeting. So, okay, I'll go mute now and somebody could start.
I can start. So my name is Ram Kumar Chinchani, and I'm the author of Zot. So I work at Cisco Systems. So we do a lot of, so we are in the container infrastructure team. So from this meeting, we just want to see how this evolves and whether Zot can actually implement some of the specs here. We're always looking to implement anything that's in the open standards for Zot. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, right here, I had said one of the next steps I think out of this meeting is make sure everyone is informed. So it's really good that you're here. Thanks, Ram Kumar.
I'm Colin Griffin. I'm with Chromeware. I'm a software engineer focused on cloud native application development and helping other organizations and teams adopt tools and processes. We have a heavy focus on DevRel and developer experience. Our interest here is to stay in tune with what the open standards need to be for information sharing, as well as distribution of applications.
Alex, you're first on my list. You'll start with an A.
Oh, hey y'all. My name is Alex Flom. I work at Red Hat as a product security engineer. About a year ago, I worked with Andy Block and Jen Power. We created something called the Universal Object Reference Framework, and that was the conceptual model that was implemented in the open source project Emporus. In that, and I think actually I see in the first agenda item, or one of the first agenda items here, I think that kind of goes over the approach of the UOR framework and the implementation of Emporus also. So I'll just stop there.
Nice to have you.
I think I was. Hey, sorry. I think I was above you in the list. I'm Jesse Butler. I'm a principal technologist on Amazon ECR, so in the container registries at AWS. Been off and on affiliated with OCI for years since runtime started. So yeah, I see at least Brandon is here as a familiar face. But yeah, just interested to be here, understand kind of what our role might be as a registry. We also have Code Artifact, which is more of an artifact store and registry on AWS, and generally looking to to facilitate the development of standards and specifications and open ways to build software for customers and across the open source ecosystem. So just wanted to kind of be here and trying to catch up because I haven't done the homework reading. So nice to meet some of you and see some familiar faces.
Let's see. Remaining Victor introduced himself before. If you don't want to introduce yourself now, Victor, you don't have to. I think that's it, except Andy. Hello.
Good timing, right?
Yes, perfect.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Block. I'm a distinguished architect with Red Hat, also on the Emporis project, as well as a Helm and SigStore maintainer. And Oras, too. I forgot.
All right. I think we went through everyone. So I didn't introduce myself, I guess, so much. I work for Red Hat. I'm a solution architect, so I spend my time trying to help customers adopt all these technologies and feel the pain of them firsthand sometimes. Oh yeah, Brandon, did you want to go? Sorry, you said you were busy, so I didn't stop for you. You want to introduce yourself? Well, he wrote that he's IBM and OCI. Yeah, and I also am a lead in Tag App Delivery and trying to make it a conducive place for projects like this to come and work together. Okay, so let's jump in. So the goal here is to finish this charter. Scott started that doc there. I kind of put down some things here to kind of guide us, but this is my brainstorm trying to set an agenda for us. This is the same doc, so that's not good. But yeah, let's bring this up and go through. I guess going through the notes that I have here, the first thing that came up is kind of this long thread, which seems to come down to what exactly is the scope, and do we, I wanted to bring up, perhaps, do we need to clarify the scope? What exactly are we targeting? All artifacts? What are artifacts, or do all content types? Yeah, do we have understanding there, or should we be specific?
I think, well, so yeah, I mean, maybe just a level setting thing. Also, is Victor here? I don't know if Victor introduced himself or not.
Oh yeah, I'm a Victor. I'm an independent. I think I'm just a student of the cloud native world. So
cool. Yeah, I think one of the things that I was wondering about this, and I looked at the charter, and it makes sense to me. Like, what scope are we talking about? I mean, is this sort of container images? Are we talking about other artifacts like jars and things like that? Like what is sort of, where are we? And I think that's the answer to this question, right? It's like, if it's an artifact, other content types, it's like everything's an artifact, or it's artifacts in OCI. So what other things are in scope? I think that's kind of where my head's at.
Can I take a stab at this? So when I was thinking about artifacts before the working group, like with the UR framework, it was pretty much anything that you can shove in a blob, like in a registry. So that could be metadata, that could be anything. So I guess I don't know if that's an unhelpful take on that, but it was pretty much anything that you can shove into a blob. And then I think at one point in the charter doc, we talked about referencing remote resources too. So like somebody had brought up pointer URLs and maybe enhancing that, the semantics around that. So I don't know if that's helpful to answering your question.
Yeah, it wasn't so much a question as I'm just trying to scope this question, right? And I think it is very useful. I think for me, if we're talking about anything you can put in a registry as an artifact, which is literally anything, like binary data, whatever you want, nothing. then I do wonder what the purpose, like why this working group is scoped like outside of the OCI, right? What was because I wasn't there when this thought came up. So what was the inception point? What triggered this? To say like, well, OCI had a working group, its first ever. We came up with answers to what we think these are.
I think it's more of we could start with OCI, but there's a good chance it's going to expand past OCI,
That's what yeah.
But we're not. But right now we're just starting with OCI, and that's why we went to tag app delivery, because OCI right now is the vehicle behind many things in cloud native architectures. So we wanted to start and work here because we are future proofing ourselves to be able to handle today's concerns, but also the future.
Yeah, I think that's, if we all agree on that, I think that's where it then starts making a lot of sense for me. Because like we said, like you can put a Helm chart into an OCI registry, there's an artifact. A Helm chart is also an artifact in a Helm repo in another registry that has nothing to do with OCI. Therefore, like it's a bigger scope, it's a bigger umbrella, and all of the integration things that come along with that. That makes a lot of sense to me.
I always like to look where the puck's going. I know the puck is going to get there at some point, so I didn't want to put us into a corner where we had to kind of step back and go, oh, we're now breaking outside of what OCI is concerned about. Let's go ahead and let's find a spot like tag app delivery and CNCF to be able to run this.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
I can add a little bit maybe to that too. I've had ad hoc correspondence with a few people here and within OCI and elsewhere. And one of the things I kind of always come back to is IPLD, which is the data model for IPFS, is also pretty appealing when we talk about a capability like this as a backend storage. I think when we talk about like past or outside of OCI, I think that's a great example that maybe this is something that has integrations there too.
That I guess I will ask the question that I asked in that thread, which is, isn't that also what content types in W3C and HTTP are about? Like a content type describes the schema basically, and
well, there's also media types, and that's what OCI uses quite a bit. I mean, because content type actually is just referencing a media type.
Yeah, I guess I didn't mean, I meant more like content type disposition in, HTTP headers.
Well, yeah. So those are in the end just media types.
Yeah, exactly.
So memes itself are just the older name for media types.
Yeah. So that, I guess that would be my question. Why not as new content types in URLs for HTTP and URLs? See what I'm saying? Like, could we use the existing URL system, universal resource locator system, to identify the content, and then one of the headers, when I call a URL, one of the headers is content type, which says, oh, this is JSON, this is XML, this is.
Well, that's kind of how Docker's API works, because you're saying I want a particular type of content at this path.
Yeah.
How does that, like when we talk about I think we already have decentralization in that scheme. How does that work when we start talking about the content addressing and other things, if we talk about just straight up HTTP and headers?
It doesn't. Yeah, that's fair. That would be a difference, that it's not intended to be content addressable.
I think after working with OCI's data models for the past while, like when you take the if you use it like a header, if you use a part of the data model as a header, it just becomes super flexible, I think, and having that DAG also kind of just like supercharges the entire capability. I think that's why the registries was like the first target, because it was like, you know, we already have these things that are everywhere. You have a lot of aspects of them that are helpful for like security and just for, you know, these other concerns that we talk about. So I guess that's kind of like where it came from when we were talking about like UOR like last year and all that.
Yeah, I also like how I mean I picked up that it's not just one, like a URL would be just one thing. Here the URL could be to an index which describes the full bundle, so that's new.
And I think it's an expansion on like the semantic web concepts too. I think that's essentially what we're talking about here. We're talking about artifact management, because we can specify the subject, object, predicate, or whatever order we want to use those terms. But part of that context can also be like pointers to like which context that you're supposed to interact with the content. You can put a lot of intelligence into those expressions.
Maybe the most important thing here is, should we subset this to something less than any kind of binary, maybe even, you know, anything? Is it just stuff that's related to software delivery? Is it, you know, is there any way to subset it or at least reduce our scope a bit? Should we?
And I'm just speaking from the UOR framework's perspective on this. But in that system, using OCI and the semantics within that system, we enabled like dynamic schema registration in that system, so that you didn't have to pigeonhole yourself into any media type or anything like that. Like it was dynamic, but those schemas that are registered can be referenced by other users in the system, so they're shareable. I think it's kind of an elegant way of handling schema and shared schema and dynamic schema in a decentralized system. So I think that by enabling that for app delivery, I think that we inherit that benefit across in industry wide.
Just really using my new entrance into this field as an advantage, as I followed the platform web paper to this particular meeting. It'll be interesting because it's very confusing for, at least for me or anyone new, I think, to have so many different repository and artifact hub and all that. So regardless of what's the final scope for technical discussions, it'll be great to clarify what is available and in what cases to use what to be able to build the platform.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Victor. I think you phrased it better. I was trying to find a way to articulate that, and that's a great way to put it. Like new developers coming into this space or folks that are trying to learn, it seems like there's 1,000 different ways to package and ship things. And I'd like to see some high level guidance or some mapping, to help people find and discover some of the downstream standards they need to learn. If that's the right way to put it, but I definitely echo that, Victor.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, because before this, my impression is you just just need artifact hub. That's the only thing you need to replace everything else. And of course I was told that's not true. So
that is an interesting point. Maybe our scope, especially to begin with, to keep it, narrower, might be the cloud native, like CNCF kind of objects. Maybe we explicitly say we're targeting these kinds of things first, or anything that's, using Kubernetes.
I think one of the early prototypes that we published demonstrated how the like OCI image spec could be a schema that I referred to, like a dynamically registered schema within this schema. So you essentially have a meta model which within can handle any specification, right? So, or any schema. So I don't know if it's helpful here to just say we define the meta model that we just generally register artifacts with, and then all of those use cases, then we could have a reference implementation from this working group where we actually do define one of the schemas that would exist within that meta model. And then that would also give the space for other people to do their own schema development within that system.
Yeah, I think we should talk about that, because that's actually here also, like what the activities are. Yeah, are we just wanted to make sure, so what do we feel on scope? Should we, does it say anything in the doc right now that restricts our scope a bit? It says application developers and architects. Yeah, I guess my ultimate question for this group is, should we somewhere say our initial work, like here it says using OCI specs, and then we said using other cloud native packages and formats. Start with cloud native artifact types not current. Like this is kind of, does this make sense? Start with cloud native artifact types not in OCI. In the future, consider other things like NPM, Maven Central, those kinds of things. And then maybe C would be like, consider general applicability to every resource on the internet.
I think it might be like you define this meta model, right? Like just that just does the thing, and then scope it, like you're saying, to pick one, right? It could be NPM, it could be PyPy, whatever, and then focus on that as the reference implementation. And then we would be able to, I think this working group could enable other schema publishers to just work adjacent to this effort, and then everybody would benefit from just providing that space maybe.
Just for a quick bit of clarification, when we say artifact types not currently packaged in OCI, does that mean we're trying to find stuff that isn't in OCI to put in OCI, or that we're looking for stuff outside of OCI to have an alternate way of packaging?
Either or, in my opinion. Like what I think of is this list. Like, should these, I don't know, backstage plugins be put into a OCI thing? And if so, can we help them, create that, document it?
Got it.
I mean, I say yes, but that's, I know I've had conversations in the past where people didn't want to throw anything and everything in an OCI registry. The idea is that it becomes a pain in the butt to be able to have all these different registry implementations without a somewhat canonical format, because it's impossible for you to then interoperate with them universally. That is, you get to for every one of the
Mm-hmm. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. Like ultimately we want to reduce cognitive load, and the best place for us to start is things like, of course, Helm and OPA that are already, but also the near adjacent stuff like cloud native stuff that's not an OCI. It doesn't have to, I guess this is, oh, you know why it doesn't say it? Because we already have the ones that are in OCI are covered by one, and this is like other non-OCI. So maybe this whole thing is using non-OCI. Yeah, there are other stakeholders using non-OCI and priority order here.
I guess what I was saying, maybe poorly, is that like just getting off of the IANA registration bandwagon and having a different way to reference schema like that, or a media type. I think that's important to me because it's just such a pain to get support for different artifact types right now. So, across registries.
Is that a pain to get into OCI, or is that a pain for other places? Because OCI doesn't require it, we recommend it.
Yeah, I think like every registry that I've interacted with is like, it's inclusionary list of artifact types that
It's not an
allow.
OCI spec though. Like you go to Docker distribution, you can store anything.
Yeah. OCI just has a blurb in there saying, we recommend it just because it avoids someone else stepping on your same media type, but
Yeah.
it's not a requirement. You put whatever field you want in there.
Most are doing it to protect themselves right now.
Yeah. And there's only one registry that has that I know of so far that has an allow list. Everybody else just allows whatever you throw at it.
I know of two. I know Docker Hub and Quay.
Docker Hub turned it off. Quay turned it off. And
No,
so
I'm
the
taking-
only one left now is GitLab.
Oh no, so I mean, okay, so I was talking about the ones that turn it on. Sorry.
So Quay had a filter. They turned it off.
It's still there. It's still 99% sure it's still enabled.
I got to check it. It was within the last few months or so, but we should probably sync up after this too anyway.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so okay, that kind of tips us. I think we have a decent consensus on this. I think Alex, you're kind of tipping us into what we're trying to achieve with these metadata schemas. But I don't know if you all are calling them that in your head, but that's what I think of in my head. I know our ultimate goal is to enable an artifact search API, which is, at least that's our first goal, which is, we think that the way to achieve that is by having a schema accessible somewhere for all the different ways people bundle things in OCI. So like that's actually comes that corresponds in the activities and in the goals. Actually, maybe our first step is try to gather all the existing pretty much undocumented ways people are creating bundles and defining content within those bundles. And if that's the case, then, the first step might be gathering those and then discussing like a dynamic schema discovery. Then the second thing, which I'll let everyone talk in a minute, but the second thing, which I think, Alex, you added these examples, and I wasn't sure, and I wanted to bring this up with the group. Is a goal to define a common data model, or is our goal mainly just to gather up all the existing ones, encourage them to learn from each other and create some synergies and then use dynamic schema? Or are we going to try to create, something that based on all the learnings?
I put in the common data model there because when you do like a predicate search in a registry, it's the Wild West, and you're not really guaranteed that you're going to get a predicate type, or you're going to discover a predicate type that you were intending to. So the reason I harp on dynamic schema registration so much is because it's really hard to distill or to scope a query in a registry or in any graph like this if you can't first identify which predicate type you're actually looking for. Because I think we see this when we talk about package manager existing formats. Like they have the same taxonomy to express different things, within those. So that's why I in this had said that if you want deterministic behavior within this system, I might not have got there yet, right? But like as far as I can tell, you have to be able to in that system refer to the predicate type somehow that you're searching for before you search for a specific predicate.
What do you mean by predicate type? Do you mean like attributes or like where? if.
So it's like when you're talking about like triples, right? Like I want to query for object relationships or whatever it is. If I say I want to find a dog, you know, a dog to somebody might be a tank, and to somebody else might be something that we know is a cat, and to somebody else might be a dog, right? So you have to have a way to like distill that down to the dog that you were intending to discover, or the object with those relationships, so, or those attributes.
Okay. I guess what I'm sitting here thinking about is how much of that is defined by the, I'm looking for the dog, so then I want dog.animal or dog.tank. So that's in the content type itself. But yeah, I guess you're saying, are you saying like within those, in the tank dog, it's got, number of turrets, how many people it can hold. In the animal dog, it's got, is he shaggy or whatever? Is he big? Is he a girl or a boy? So you don't know what the sub attributes that are in there?
Yeah, I think,
Schema.
yeah, I think it's really easy when you want to drill down into something, right? And you can be very specific about it. If you have like nested objects or something, or like whatever the taxonomy is, if you can be very specific in your search, then yeah, you don't have to know what schema the types are, at the high level. But like if you want to do a general search without being that specific, then it becomes a lot more difficult to weed out the stuff that you don't want. So that's kind of goes into that.
So I guess I'm thinking about what we need to answer here. So thinking about like the order of goals, we would gather existing layouts and schemas, and then would there be a goal to define some sort of dynamic schema discovery mechanism?
Yeah, I think what this is just indexing. Like if we just said right now, like it's going to be in Toto, right? And so all of our attestations are going to be in Toto because they already have the signing envelopes figured out, and a lot of that the back end details there. And we said, okay, well, we're just going to index in Toto attestations. Then we inherit a lot of this, right? Because they already have the triples defined for us in their data model. So I think on some levels, all this is to me is just deciding the way that we want to express links, and then defining a way. And I know Sage had been saying to be careful about how we don't want to tell people how to index like in their registry, right? Like, so there's a balance there, but if you can be specific enough about how those relationships are expressed, then I think that might provide a little bit of guidance as to how these things are indexed and handled in the back end, and then the deterministic result.
What do other folks think? Is this seem achievable? Do we need to together determine, if we just list all the schemas somehow in open containers artifacts, then maybe we can work together on, at its simplest, you could just slurp up, like JSON schemas, those schemas, and use them. Do we think it's reasonable to kind of work together as we go to establish like a best practice for finding all of those, and maybe that in Toto thing?
Again, from a new user perspective, it really depends on whether, because again, the platform is taking off, right? The platform concept. Is this group, the work from this group, is that going to define a clear picture for new users? If so, I guess it's possible for everybody to want to be part of this discussion, and therefore make it possible to achieve the goals there.
Yeah, I think a lot of this would be done automatically. By the, the clients will know how to find the content types. For example, they might even have the bundle from the repo included in the binary, and then use them to read and then present them within, like, my thinking would be like a controller in the cluster that could read that stuff and explode the package and know how to apply, or query is the main use case here.
So you mentioned controller cluster. I wanted to make sure we're not tying ourselves to
Sorry.
two things.
Query, that's our use case.
Yeah.
I think of controller cluster also. So that would be like, if I query, give me all of the SBOMs related to this chart, it would know, it would pull the chart, and then the chart, I don't know, maybe one day could point to an image, and it would be able to pull the image and see, oh, well, that's the image spec content type, and know where to find the SBOM in that. I know image spec doesn't have that, but and pull another type and find, that one. But it would be like, it wouldn't be the end user saying, oh, I want these types. Like, this would be automated within the search client, to answer Victor's question.
Talking about that, because I said, since I have time, I do attend a lot of meetings. One of the meetings, one of the package, I forgot which package installer maintainer actually said it is, at least at this very moment, very unlikely for that particular package installer to even build the SBOM capability into that particular product. So, but I think if it's through this effort, it will be a great place to, I guess, get people to know that it will be an advantage for those, for everyone to actually have SBOM. Yeah, that's just what I heard from that person.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, one area of interest for me, and it could be a lack of understanding if something is out there or not in general, but for applications or expansive applications that have multiple distribution types, multiple packaging types, I don't have a clear way today to, I guess explode is the term that you used before, but I don't have a good way today to explore all the different parts and pieces of an application, like a hybrid application of that type, unless it's just totally built on containers and it has a Helm chart or something like that, right? And so Helm has me covered if I'm in containers, but what about all these new technologies that are coming and where things are being shipped and how they need to be run and what systems are required to be able to run and process these types of packages and things there. Maybe something like that exists. If it doesn't, that's something I'd like to see come out of this as a way to map those components.
Yeah, I put that as the problem statement because I think that is exactly, I mean, that's what query means. We want you to be able to query and discover everything related to an image or everything that's your Helm chart. Does that make sense, folks? I added that as a problem statement because I've seen that in some other things, and it might help clarify. We might have put it in here some too, but maybe we can add a couple more of those. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this in right now as a goal to define a common pattern, let's say, for discovering existing schemas. Yeah, so let's move on to the next one. Define an extensible common data model. So this was like, I put this as a to-do here, because I know that one of the things this kind of touches actually on the other topic, which is OCI and CNCF. Of course, we can create prototypes. We could create a common format, and show how it might look. we could create an open source implementation. We could start working on, an official, I guess, image spec 2.0 or something that would be more generic, more common data model that we could propose to OCI, or something else. Should we have that as a goal? I guess, I wanted to talk about that.
I would be curious what's missing from the current spec that you need.
I kind of, reflecting what Alex was saying before, I kind of think it comes down to discovering the attributes that are specific to all the different content types, so that, I could get the SBOM or the attestation for the tank dog and for the animal dog easily, because I would just dynamically look up the schema.
Okay, so search distribution spec, not image spec. That was what was confusing me.
Well, it's kind of the reason why I mentioned image spec is because it really it's the content with it. Distribution spec would stay, I think, the same. It's the content within what you pull down, which we're defining in these first 3 bullets, at least. Right?
I think that one thing that's missing is like an artifact index. Right now, there's only you can sort of kind of squint and look at image index and say that could be a index of artifacts, but it's not quite ergonomic. There's a lot of extra puts in order to push all those scratch blobs. So that's one thing. I think there's another thing where it might be more about standardizing, working with some of these folks like Cosign and Notary and all these other places. Think about like, what are the standard artifact types, like INA media types that maybe it would help to have a CNCF working group sort of work with to like, because if we're going to try to crawl and discover within a distribution spec all of the SBOMs, we kind of, I think, need to find some sort of common ground on what are the query parameters, what is an SBOM, what is an attestation, how do I query for that? So that's not defined in image spec. I think that's being left up to the community. I think CNCF is a good sort of place for us to be a sort of Switzerland to broker between all of these different groups of like, regardless of which tool you're using, people want to be able to discover the things that you're attaching to your images or your artifacts. We should kind of come up with some common attributes or values, INA media types or something like that.
Aaron, that actually reminds me. I think that, and I don't know if where this goes in the charter in this doc, but it's like a query, right? Like the subject of my query is this artifact, and I want to know all of the ways that this artifact has been referred to. And then you can look at each of those and say, oh, well, this artifact exists in an NPM schema. This artifact exists in an RPM schema. This artifact exists within an image, and this artifact is referenced by an SBOM. Like there's just like, so I think that's the most compelling query to me when we talk about this system.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about possibly something like an extension for distribution spec that allows sort of that introspection of images, because images or even most of the archive formats that exist out there, like we mentioned Helm charts earlier, they either reference or contain other artifacts, and being able to discover that graph, potentially distribution spec extension or something like that, to be able to do that would be very interesting.
I kind of see like in the distribution spec, it would be, let's say, a new endpoint, say, post query, post to / query, and then it would depend underneath the registry would actually take the query and apply it to the data model. That's why I kind of have this in kind of order. Or you do, whoever wrote this, or has reiterating, that's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, because I think one of the common things we've talked about is like, how do I discover all of the vulnerabilities of a particular package, that it might exist in images, might exist in zip files or other things that are uploaded to a registry. Because that's what I care about, is like there's a new vulnerability report and I want to be able to remediate that. How can we extend the distribution spec to search inside of things?
So let's explore that.
I-
So like, yeah, if you needed to find it, what would you do? You would go find the SBOM by querying for a known property. You'd pull it back, you'd look for that thing, and then you'd see, okay, they have this version, they have this vulnerability.
I am imagining you're going to go down a rat hole really quickly on this when you start thinking about things like Helm charts, because a Helm chart has variables that can change. And so depending on what the variables are set to, you can point to a completely different tag or a different image.
Yeah, I had that same concern, Brandon.
I just want to wrap the previous before we finish up on this. So I think we're saying by defining an extensible common data model, it's not really our goal to define the whole model. I think we really we want to advocate for some standard kind of formats, maybe some duck types. I use the word duck types that's used in Knative to describe like, oh, every spec should have, you know, replicas or a service account, whatever, stuff like that. Like maybe we can establish some common attributes. And then like if there is a need for like a new common, like I could see, I'm sorry, Brandon and OCI folks, I could see, you know, the whole image spec becoming more of an object spec or an artifact spec and genericizing that. But I think that it would be more us influencing you towards like an artifact spec 2.0 or something.
There's already there's already a suggestion that we go down that path. Not just from you, but when we pulled out the artifact manifest before, it was with the idea that we need to go back and revisit it and look at something that has a little bit more of a generic format that has a lot of value for people. So that is something OCI has already got on the eventual roadmap. And some of the people that are pushing for it are not here. So I want to be careful that we don't fork the effort between two different groups.
Yeah, I kind of think what I'm coming out here is we should influence you all. Like we might have a duck type or two or some attributes that we establish, and then we will say, hey, we'll join you to define the spec.
Yeah, it would be really good to hear some of the ideas about what people want to see changed in there included, so we get this right next time, because we've gone down the wrong path a few times already.
Brandon, were you saying that the image spec would be a subset of the artifact spec then? Like
the image spec is kind of becoming the place where we define whatever the JSON objects are that you're pushing to a registry. And so we've got the manifest, the descriptors, that stuff. Now, there was an attempt to, in addition to the image manifest, to have an artifact manifest that got pulled back recently. And in pulling that back, the comment was that we want to recreate it in the future with something much more generic or much more extensible than what we had already. And so using the image spec, we're able to do a whole lot. And so that was why my question was come up earlier of what is image spec not doing for you? Because the things that it's not doing for you might be things we want to include in a future artifact manifest.
Okay, cool.
So on that one, I ended up putting this. Are people okay with the language here? Contribute to a common data model for artifacts.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, at the end of the day, all we're talking about is just indexing here, right? We're just trying to figure out how to express entity relationships in a way that, and attributes in a way that can be indexed. I mean, is that the scope of this entire effort, or am I oversimplifying it?
I think there's some discovery and definition of like what the packaging types are that are deemed maybe cloud native related, and some of that as well, and not just an indexing methodology.
I do worry about over indexing on sort of cloud native here. Is I think in an ideal world in the future, in the not too distant future, some language package managers use OCI as a registry store, and I'm not just doing cloud native artifacts, but I'm searching cargo crates, I'm searching, that's a Rust package, I'm searching NPM modules, I'm searching all these things as well. So I maybe want to push back a little bit on saying restricting it to cloud native artifacts. These are software artifacts, and I think I really care about discovering all of those in my system, not just the ones that are running on containers.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. I didn't mean to try to narrow too much, but
yeah,
just trying to, where does, if this is CNCF, like, does that mean it provides some guardrails? One area that's similar to what you're talking about, Aaron, that's passionate to me is we need a way to connect different standards and specs and just documentation across projects and create some dependency trees for documentation and for specs as well. And it's not like a typical compile some code and package it in this case, but it would be nice to be able to, alongside this, see what specs these application artifacts follow and include that as some sort of part of the discoverability as well. I hesitate to bring that up because I don't want to just create a dependency tree of a bunch of readmes or something like that, but it's an interesting conversation I've been thinking about a lot. It might also be relevant.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to be like put too much of an aside in here because I know we're like coming up at time, but like when we first came up with the UR framework, that was because we were having to bundle software systems for air gap operations. And so like the question is like, how can you lift and shift an entire like ecosystem for an air gap, right? And that's like when you talk about that, I can go totally off on a tangent here, but like I think that that's a great example of like where my mind was at when we started going down this a year ago.
Yeah, I put that as a problem statement, Alex, and maybe we can iterate on that. Okay, we're coming to time, so I want to make sure we're covering. Okay, the last thing we did kind of talk about a prototype search API, which would be that extension to OCI distribution spec. That seems reasonable. It seems like this goes along with this, like a query over this data model. That could even be something we develop ourselves because it's if there's an extensibility mechanism already in OCI.
There is an extensibility mechanism. The thing that we've always had a hard time with on OCI is getting representation from a lot of the major registry vendors. We've got a handful. I think we've got a couple here. But to hear what someone like GCR, ECR, any of the major registries out there, Docker Hub, someone like that, says on this would go a long way.
What might this, I know we're at, but what might this look like? Like a post to slash query with some query parameters, something along those lines? Is that?
The format for extension, there's just an underscore that goes in there and a couple fields you have to put in. And the underscore just means that it's not a normal API call. It goes off to your extension at that point. It puts you in a namespace that you're not going to collide.
Yeah, okay. I meant more like, is implementing this or pursuing this something that, I was trying to get to illustrate what it might look like. Does that seem reasonable for folks? Is it something,
I asked this before, and I think Brandon, you might have actually answered it outside of this meeting, but could GraphQL be an extension or does it have to be like a REST endpoint with like query parameters like we've seen?
I think it is going to be. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think we discussed this in OCI, and nothing in the distribution spec places a requirement on the request or response body format. So GraphQL looked permitted unless there's something like maybe something involving like .well known or some other behavior that might conflict with distribution spec, but first blush it looked okay.
Yeah, as long as you can get it within that namespace of your underscore / whatever your extension is, it's pretty much free form after that.
Nice. Cool. Thanks.
Okay. And then the last thing in our goals is develop a prototype. So I think that would be pretty straightforward. So I know that we're at time. So what is our next steps here? Can we integrate some of these comments, look over this doc again and make sure we're okay with it? Should we meet again, say in a week?
Are we going to make this a recurring meeting?
Yeah, I guess anyway, this needs to become a recurring meeting, actually. So maybe that's the question. But I know it's at 12 o'clock already, or my time it is. What times should we meet? What's a good time for folks? Or should we?
This works for me. Not fantastic, but in the interest of people that aren't in the meeting today, because I think you tend to, when you're in a meeting, ask people what the good time is. It's everybody's in the meeting. It's like, well, this time worked for me, but everybody's not in the meeting. Can't say no. Probably a doodle poll posted to the Slack channel or something like that would be a good thing to do.
Start a poll. And let's play, like, let's iterate, let's all like look over, think about this stuff, iterate on the doc, and let's meet again next week. Actually, next Friday won't work for me. Maybe Thursday. Let's talk about it in the thing. We'll figure it out. If nothing else, maybe Monday, the following Monday or Tuesday.
Well,
Red Hat
just
has a conference
yeah,
this week.
let's just throw a couple polls out there and see what the community says.
Yeah. In the meantime, I put these other things, and if you all can help us, like, make sure we have the eyes of all the folks that we need to have on here. You can send them to the notes or to the doc or whatever. Yeah, these are the things that we do, I guess. Those are not yet. Those are once we define the query API and start gathering specs. That's our next steps once this is ironed out. Although we could start doing that, honestly. Like, we could start, I looked over this, it seems like a lot of it comes down to, asking artifact authors to kind of put their specs in here somewhere.
Yeah, we're probably going to archive this in the not too distant future. We've got some changes over in image spec that add even more features. So going to direct people over to image spec instead of the artifact repo there.
Okay.
2 roadblocks I think you'll run into at some point. Just to be aware of things to think about is when you start thinking about authentication and when you start thinking about adding any new API like this on a registry, workload on the registry to implement it. That's where we'll see hesitation from registry operators are used to something that's a content addressable store that is very easy to distribute through load balancers, proxies, all the cloudy things that they do. And when you start having an API call that they have to hit for every query, that's something that they push back on heavily.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll have to figure that out when we define that API. Like, making it GraphQL will probably not be appealing to a lot of registry vendors.
Yeah, the extra load, the authentication is because authentication is typically scoped per repository. So if you're looking at something that needs to span multiple repositories, you're going to see issues on that too.
Yeah, authentication, authorization across many repos.
All right.
And on Brandon, on gathering existing specs, is there a place like somebody could, I guess there's a spec for Helm somewhere. Andy, do we have that somewhere? Could we start gathering them?
What spec are we talking about?
For how you describe in the image spec how a chart is discovered.
We do. And I just wrote a blog on it too.
So where are you storing that now?
It's currently on the website right now.
In the Helm website?
I also have a blog that talks about it too. But if you want to just call me out for Helm, I can go ahead and add it.
Yeah, well, I don't have a place to put it, but that's great. That's
No,
exactly like,
no, I'm saying if you want to just throw it there and just tag me right there,
oh,
I'll add
okay,
I'll add the links at least to have to
Perfect.
throw there.
perfect. Thank you, Andy. Yeah,
Add
so
my,
that's basically,
add my Gmail account, I think.
oh, okay. Might not have that. I don't think I have that.
I'll
Well,
hit you up
stay-
offline. I'll hit you
Yeah.
offline.
Yeah, that's cool. But basically, let's think about how we could put that and some other ones in a common space. We don't have it right now, it sounds like. I'll write that with Andy. Think about a common space. So we have that. We have review, review and comment again on doc, on charter doc. Get more reviewers. Start gathering specs. Set up a recurring meeting starting hopefully next week or the week after. What do you think? How are anything else we should talk about?
Sorry, I went so heavy on your framework today. Sorry, didn't mean to take up that much.
It's fine. Clearly, it's a big influence here.
Cool.
All right. So I did record this. So yeah, I'll get it uploaded and we can share it around if people want to know what we talked about or how we arrived at these things and the notes. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And I'll talk to you soon.